What's up, everybody? Welcome into yet another edition of the Baseline Jumper podcast. My name is Jason Goldstein, and on the line with me right now is a man who I have scarred for life officially, Ben McDonald. Ben, I am so sorry.
No, you know what? It was the high point of my day, Jason. Do you want to tell the people what happened? I feel like now that you've put this as the intro, you kind of have to tell the story.
So Ben and I record on Skype because we are 6 hours apart, and I miss him dearly. But we usually just use audio. Like even when we have guests, we only use the audio component of Skype. However, when Ben called me to do our prep, I accidentally hit the video,
Ow,
and Ben saw
ow!
something that was not pretty at all. Yeah, I'm half dressed. I guess I'm doing the show after a long day of work, and didn't think anyone was gonna see. And lo and behold, Ben, I apologize, pal.
Yeah, for the ladies listening, you know, Jason is off limits. I'm not letting him out of my sight at this point, but you can look forward to future vlogs. We'll be doing some video blogs, video podcasts so that you can get all of that imagery along with your hot NBA takes. But Jason, as much as I could just wax poetic about that beautiful body of yours, I do have to say we do have basketball to talk about, and that's what we are not getting paid to talk about. And if you look around, there have been some kind of exciting things going on around the league. There's been a few surprise teams. There's been some good, some bad. Where do you want to start?
Well, I think we should start with the most relevant news. Just as we're getting set to record, Trae Young leaves early in the Hawks game against the Miami Heat with a right ankle injury. He was down for a while. I saw the House of Highlights video. Didn't look good, so prayers up to Trae Young. Hopefully we'll have more next week when we record, but he's out for the game right now. The Heat currently up on the Hawks, but it's a little unnerving, one, because Trae Young is one of the up-and-coming guards in the league, and two, I have the Hawks as a playoff team in the East, so without him, they're definitely going to struggle, so you have to hope he's not out too long, but like I said, we don't have too much info right now.
Yeah, I mean, Woj just tweeted like 5 minutes ago that X-rays are negative. I think
Oh, good.
Woj must literally be in the locker room. It's unbelievable. But yeah, hopefully Trae Young is back all right. It's just an ankle sprain, something like that. But yeah, I
I
mean, that would
wonder
be
how that
terrible.
works. I know it would be terrible, but I wonder how that works. Like, the second news breaks, is someone in the room go, "Oh, gotta tell Woj." Like, is he that in?
He really is, though. He must be pretty much on some of these teams at this point. But I mean,
I'm
with
waiting
the
for Woj
Hawks,
to tweet that you caught me shirtless before recording our podcast. Like, he's everywhere.
he is. He's like the reverse Where's Waldo. Like he's just everywhere all the time. You can always see Woj in everything you're doing. But I do think that it's a big loss for them if he misses any time for the Hawks because they rely on him so much. You know what's sort of insane right now, Jason, is if you look at the leaderboards and you look at who's at the top of scoring, number one in the league is your own Kyrie Irving, but number two is Trae Young. I mean, he took a big step forward, and it's part of the reason the Hawks have been 2-1 to start the season.
No, absolutely. So we have to hope that, he misses minimal time, if that, and the Hawks can keep building on this thing. I don't know if you saw the highlight also of Vince Carter. He went up for a dunk and kind of like stopped and just hit a little floater from 2 feet from the rim. And they made a video montage of like Carter going up and then a bunch of his highlight dunks and then the end of the play, which he did score on. But Father Time has unfortunately caught up to Vinsanity. And the Hawks are just one of the few good stories, in the first week of the NBA season. I mean, Ben and I were going to do, some surprises and some disappointing teams, but I thought that 1 week is a bit too small of a sample size as most teams have played anywhere between 3 and 4 games. So we're gonna give you some good and some bad from week one here in this 2019-2020 NBA season. And I know there's a good that you would like to start with, Benjamin.
Well, I mean, if you look at the Mavericks, Jason, I mean, they have been remarkable. I found this team incredibly hard to peg when we were trying to do the over-unders. But one thing that has jumped out is, my goodness, are Luka and Porzingis something else? If you've watched any of their games, I mean, even the game they lost to Portland, it is just remarkable how good these two guys are. I mean, Porzingis is hitting step back threes, blocking shots effortlessly. Meanwhile, Doncic is just I mean, Doncic is trying to get into Russell Westbrook territory at this point. I mean, it's wild how well he's playing. He's averaging almost 30 points, 10 rebounds, and 7 assists a game. I mean, you can't do much better than that. So ultimately, I think this team is a really, really interesting team to look at. But the question, Jason, I think is what else is on the roster?
Yeah, definitely. And I think the hearts of Knicks fans everywhere are sinking when they see how good Porzingis looks in the early going. I mean, he was in the gym pretty much for a year and a half straight after the devastating injury. That was his last game as a Knick, and then ended up getting traded while he was still recovering from the injury. And they held him out the whole rest of the season. He was a restricted free agent. Mark Cuban bought in, signed him to a max deal for a player that's been in the league for as long as Porzingis has, and it's paid dividends so far. I mean, in a league of dynamic duos, Porzingis and Luka may be, inching up a lot of people's lists. The Mavericks being one of
Mm-hmm.
the, if you will, surprise teams for the first week of the season. I still don't have them as a playoff team, but the Luka and Kristaps combo could lead them to new heights, especially since both of them are so young and two arguably of the best European players in the game. But you're right. The rest of the roster needs a lot of work. I mean, they gave up Dennis Smith Jr., Wes Matthews, DeAndre Jordan, a lot of rotation pieces to get Porzingis. They have an extremely young roster outside of these young two. So there's definitely some pieces to be added. But it'll be interesting to see if any of these bench guys that we talked about in our season preview will step up and contribute more than they already are.
Yeah, I mean, I think what is really noticeable, and you see it when you watch the Mavericks play already this year, you like some of the guys on their team, but they're just really overtaxed. And the one thing I'm a little worried about with this team, Jason, is I think they might regret some of the deals they made in the offseason just because I don't think they're going to want to be locked into these guys past the next year or two because really they have two superstars potentially if they're healthy. And if they could get a third guy, it would really make this team really really interesting in terms of the championship picture. And yet they're relying on I like DeLon Wright. I think he's a solid player. I mean, Tim Hardaway Jr., solid guy. Seth Curry, solid guy. And those guys can all play around these two. They're complementary, but they're just guys who are probably never making an all-star team. And I don't know. I'm not sure they're good enough to really surround them. So that's my one concern with this team. I mean, I think they've looked good, but I'm not sure how high the ceiling is when your third best player is probably Seth Curry.
Well, they have their number one and their number two. They have a battle tested head coach who's won championships. And now they have to fill out the rest of the roster and see what they can get with that. And while we're on the bad, I know this is a bit outdated, but I wanted to get your thoughts on the DeAndre Ayton suspension. Allegedly took something that was not permissible by league standards, and the 2018 number one overall pick finds himself with a 25-game ban. I mean, he had a strong rookie year, but given the way Doncic has looked, given the way Bagley has looked, even though he's out the next few weeks, he hurt his thumb in the Kings opener. And given the way some of the other guys have looked from last year's draft class, I mean, is Ayton, slipping down the list of number one picks, potentially going towards bust, or is it too early to make that assumption?
I think it's a little bit too early. We also have to see how long the suspension will end up being. It's being appealed, so we'll see. It started as 25, but maybe it'll be a bit less. He looked good in the first game, and I don't know. I mean, I kind of like the way that he's progressed in the league. He's looked passable on defense. He's very springy, and he's a really good offensive player. So let's sort of see what happens there. I think I'd still take him over a guy like Bagley, although not taking him over Doncic, I'll tell you that, or Trae Young.
Yeah, no, that's shaping up to be a pretty good draft class. And, Ayton was the one that was most NBA ready, but he's being surpassed by a lot of his peers. So hopefully he'll rebound. I mean, while we're on the subject of young guys, I mean, let's do a little baseline jumper rookie watch. Obviously, Zion Williamson's NBA debut is on hold till at least early December, hoping he'll be back before Christmas. But, some of the other top picks, like John Morant, has looked really good so far. You saw in Memphis' win over the Nets, he had 30 points. He was all over the floor, slashing to the rim, drawing contact. Then you have R.J. Barrett, who has been the best player on the Knicks, even though Bobby Portis had the game of his life against your Bulls on Monday night. I mean, how are the rookies adjusting so far in their first week as pros?
I mean, I think they've been kind of what you might expect in that they've been a little up and down. Uh, I got to watch Morant play against the Bulls, and he was okay. He wasn't he wasn't incredible, but then against the Nets, he looked really, really good. So that's sort of, I think, what you're really expecting with a lot of these guys is that they're kind of going to have their ups and downs. So we'll see. I mean, it's similar with a guy like Kobe White on the Bulls. He's had some really nice moments, but we'll see. I think RJ Barrett is pretty impressive, and I really like one thing that Coach Fizdale for the Knicks has done. He's made one really, really smart move, I think, that I really appreciated, which was that he was letting him just run the offense. He was basically letting him be the point guard. And that, I think, is a brilliant move by Coach Fizdale, just because ultimately the other guys on the team at point guard have just not shown that they can really do it. And putting the ball in Barrett's hands makes him so much more dynamic because it changes the way teams have to defend him. And the fact that he's not a great shooter becomes much less of an issue when you play him at the one. So I think that is really, really nice. And it lets guys like Ntilikina kind of fit around him as opposed to being a little overmatched with the ball in their hands. So I like that. And right now, I have to say, RJ Barrett's probably the guy I've been most impressed with so far.
Yeah, he's been really good. He's been the de facto point guard, if you will, because Frank has barely gotten off the bench until the win over the Bulls Monday. I mean, Elfrid Payton's been starting but not playing heavy minutes, and then Dennis Smith Jr. has not looked good at all. I don't want to knock him too much because he had a death in the family. Now he's away from the team, so thoughts and prayers to the Smith family, as well as Reggie Bullock, who the news came out lost his sister. So the Knicks are going through some trying times right now as a team, and they need a point guard. So Barrett stepped up in that role, and I do like what Frank did. You know, Fizdale called his number with Smith out, with Payton not playing too many minutes, and the Knicks got themselves a good win against the Bulls after, they were blown out by the Spurs and the Celtics, and they almost beat the Nets if it weren't for Irving's heroics, which we'll get to later in the show. But getting to some other teams in the Atlantic Division, I mean, the Sixers and the Raptors. The Sixers are your pick to win the title this year, and the Raptors, we don't know where they're going to end up. But I think they heard our preview because I don't know if they're going to sell off their assets just yet. They're looking pretty good in the early going.
Yeah, I mean, their defense is something else. And I think one thing that I think a lot of us, including you and me, may have underrated about this team, Jason, is that Nick Nurse is a really, really good NBA coach. And I think we saw it a little bit last year with the way that he utilized Kawhi Leonard. But, Jason, just watching him this year, I've watched a couple of the games. I watched the Celtics game, I watched a little bit of the Pelicans, and I watched the Bulls game. He just looks like he just really knows what he's trying to do. And I think it's something we saw a little bit. I'm going to make a little call out to your Nets, but it's so important for NBA teams to have an identity, to know what they're trying to do. And this Raptors team really knows what they're trying to do. They have a real identity. Now, I will say one thing that you notice with this Raptors team is that their depth falls off very, very quickly. They have 7 or 8 really solid players, and right after that, it gets to guys that you really don't want to see playing a whole lot of minutes. They're really specialists. Guys like Matt Thomas, Stanley Johnson. You do not want to see those guys in the game. Chris Boucher. I mean, if they have some injuries, this is going to be a team that could get hit really, really hard. They really don't have much room for injuries, and it really shows in the fact that Lowry and Van Vliet are starting at the guard positions. But my goodness, Jason, I mean, this is going to be, if they stay healthy, they will be a top 5 defense probably this year. I mean, they are really, really good. They're really switchable. They're incredibly smart. Between Ibaka and Gasol, they have rim protection the whole game. OG Anunoby was jumping off the screen in the Bulls game at points, Jason, and he's a guy who kind of came into the league under the radar, and